A man and his son were walking and riding a donkey. And as the people noticed the two of them on the donkey, they said, "Oh, look how cruel they are, making that donkey bear all of their burden." So the man decided he would get off and let his son ride. And the people said, "Oh, look how disrespectful that son is. He makes his father walk while he rides." So the father decided to trade places with the son, have the son walk. And the people said, "Oh, look how this father's so cruel, riding on the donkey, making his son walk." So the father decided he'd get off the donkey and walk alongside the donkey with his son. And the people pointed and looked and said, "Look, they have a donkey and they're not riding it. They're so silly." Brothers and sisters, this kind of example of always seeing the negative is what we could say the media does when it comes to looking at the priesthood. Today we celebrate Priesthood Sunday, and we heard in that second reading that it's true that priests are chosen among men, and they have weaknesses that sometimes allow them to be able to know the problems of others intimately, to be able to relate to them. We see that the Lord is calling all of his people to help in the mission that Jesus gives to us. We heard in that first reading that God is gathering everyone together, gathering his people back, gathering it into a community. We could call that community the church. The group that is called to be together, ecclesia, the church. In Spanish, iglesia, a community called together, where we receive healing and restoration. Jesus makes this quite clear by literally healing a blind man in the gospel. He shows us this. He shows us this. And we see, brothers and sisters, that we might think that there may be more attention to what happens here at church if people were actually being healed. If we saw people receiving sight who were blind. But I might say that it's not so much that miracles aren't happening here as much as it is perhaps that we are blind to the miracles that are happening. Today, all throughout this day, there have been miracles happening here at St. Francis Xavier. Here today, in a few minutes, we know that at least 2 miracles will happen. Let me explain. In a few minutes, Jesus is going to take bread and wine and transform them into his body and blood, his soul and divinity. That's the first miracle. The second miracle that's going to happen is that Jesus, after changing the bread and the wine into his body and blood, soul and divinity, he's going to keep those 2 things appearing and tasting as if they are still bread and wine, so that we can receive him into us in a way that is palatable, so that we won't want to gag. The other miracles that will happen is, simply put, those of us who are conscious of only having committed small sins, what they call venial sins, will receive Jesus and he will heal us of those sins at this Eucharist. We know, of course, that if we're conscious of grave or mortal sins, that we're to go to confession to have those sins forgiven. Another miracle that happens as Jesus heals us and restores us. And he does this somehow wanting to do so through frail humanity. Priests. I always say to folks, we priests, we're a little bit like glorified waiters. Let me explain. When you go to a restaurant, who's the one sitting down? The one who's important? Or are they the ones who are standing up? The person who is important is sitting down at table, of course. And the waiter or the servant is the one standing at the table, serving. We see the same thing here. The priest is the one standing, not because he is special, but because he is ministering to the people of God. We could say that a priest, in Latin they call him a pontifex, that is, one who builds a bridge. We see what happens. The priest helps the people of God to encounter God in the sacraments. But this is what Jesus has done for us so that all of us can live out the priesthood of our baptism, because every single baptized person is baptized as Christ, priest, prophet, and king. So, brothers and sisters, though we come here and celebrate the Eucharist and encounter God, it is the source of our spiritual life and the summit of our spiritual life. There is still yet another part of our spiritual life, and that is when we leave here. Because Christ calls each of us to go forth from this place and to bring Him to others, building that bridge, helping others who maybe do not know Him to encounter Him. And we see that happening in the Gospel. I'm going to spell it out a little bit here. We see Bartimaeus. He's blind, and he's calling out for Jesus. Jesus is with a bunch of His followers, and Jesus says, "Call him." Jesus knows that Bartimaeus is the one calling directly for him, but He tells His followers to be the ones to go to Bartimaeus, to tell Bartimaeus, "Arise, have courage. Jesus is calling you." And Bartimaeus, by the help of other followers of Jesus, is able to get up, to take courage, and go and encounter the Lord. And that's what the Lord does for each and every single one of us, brothers and sisters. This is what He does. We heard it with Bartimaeus. Jesus heals him, and then Bartimaeus follows Him. The same thing happens for us. Jesus heals us in one way or another. And then Jesus calls us to walk along the way with Him, to be like Him, going forth and bringing the light of the world to others. And so we want to conclude with just two simple prayers. We want to pray with Bartimaeus today. We want to say, "Master, I want to see." Because many times we feel blind. We feel like there is not a way forward. We feel as though there's a situation in our lives that is too much for us. It could be that we don't know what to do in our work situation, or maybe in school we've got this huge test coming up and we're not sure how we're going to be able to do it. Or maybe there's a person in our family that's offended us and we don't know how things are going to be able to be reconciled. And so we ask the Lord to heal those areas of blindness within us. We say to Him, "Master, I want to see." But the Lord also tells Bartimaeus, "Go your way." And the Lord sends us. So maybe the Lord is sending us too to encounter someone this week. And so we ask the Lord to reveal to us who He is looking for us to meet, to help know Him better, and how He wants us to do that. Now, perhaps the Lord might not give us that answer immediately at this Mass. Maybe it'll take a few days for Him to show the answer, but we trust that He will indeed respond to our sincere prayers the same way he responded to Bartimaeus. Because we, just like him, call out, Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me. Amen.